Last night, Colleen and I went to see a movie about time travel. So I want you to join me for just a moment in time travel back to mid-19th century Germany. It's the birthplace of modern psychology, with names like Freud and Stumpf and Husserl and Helmholtz and Wundt and Fechner and Brentano. Don't you love those names? With the birth of psychology, it was difficult to know how do you name this new discipline of psychology comprehensively enough. And so in inimitable German fashion, they came up with two words to describe the science of psychology. In German, it's Naturswissenschaften, which literally means natural science. That's looking at psychology from the outside. It's the basis of empirical studies. The second term they used is Geisteswissenschaften, and Geistes in German means literally ghost or spirit. So it would be, in a sense, spiritual science. Can't really study human psychology without also taking an insider's perspective. This is the basis of a big word called phenomenological studies. This is the basis of phenomenology in psychology, is that it's not enough to look at behavior from the outside in psychology. We have to also examine experience from the inside. Now, this distinction applies in two ways to today's presenters. First of all, Faith McClure, Dr. Faith Holmes McClure, Dr. Edward Tiber have credentials as long as you can imagine. Both as professors that I know are dearly loved by your students. We have some in the audience today. As psychologists that have made a tremendous amount of difference in scores of individuals and groups' lives. As supervisors that have touched, again, countless individuals' lives through their clinic work. As researchers, I'll talk more about that in a moment, and as authors of multiple books and countless articles. Their credentials from the outside speak for themselves. But I want to talk about Geisteswissenschaften for a moment, and that is from the inside, my relationship to Faith and Ed. A lot of emotion here. Faith and I met 35 years ago in my first psychology class. The very first day I sat down and I was 2 seats in front of her. The professor asked my name, and then 2 people later asked her name, and I turned around and where does this woman with the British accent come from? And then I look and find out that she's South African by way of Swaziland. Faith and I have been fast friends all of these 35 years. In fact, it's more accurate to say that she's my sister. 20 years later, I met Ed. That's now 15 years ago. And Ed, immediately from the very beginning of meeting you, I was just talking with somebody about one of those meetings in the audience today, was a sense of soul brotherness with you, and that's persisted to this day. So, the outside and the inside with both of you. This distinction between Geisteswissenschaften and Naturswissenschaften applies in another way, and I want to speak specifically to the work that Ed and Faith have done all these years, is that they have studied the science of psychotherapy, looking at, for example, psychotherapy process research, studies of therapeutic efficacy, about which they'll be speaking today for sure. But the content of what they've studied is what I like to think of as the art of psychotherapy, and namely their central assertion, which is this, is that it's the relationship between 2 souls, client and therapist, that is the key transformative agent in psychotherapy. That's where the healing really happens, and that's the title of their presentation, and you'll see, we'll investigate this more fully today. I'm delighted that Faith and Ed have agreed to be so generous in giving us your time today and have committed to help us in initiating a brand new program of clinical training where we've revised the practicum curriculum completely from ground up, and that's actually being initiated this week. So it's been months in the work, their writings, 2 of their books. This is the central textbook for our practicum courses, beginning with the PsyD program, Interpersonal Process and Therapy and Integrative Model, now in its 6th edition? Sixth edition. It's the standard in the field, and I've known students all over the country that have spoken of this book, not only that they've used this book, but it was the highlight of their entire graduate education of this book. Edward, Faith, and they've included now a workbook that is hands-on applications that we'll be utilizing fully throughout our entire clinical training program now. Ed and Faith have agreed to help us with this. I'm very grateful as we kick this off. Our goal in the changes, not only in our clinical training program in regards to practicum courses, as well as implementing in the next weeks a research program to study how effective we're accomplishing our goals. Our central goal is to train emotionally intelligent therapists. That's kind of the condensed, distilled down version. And if I think about it in terms of emotional intelligence, it ties into this earlier distinction is, what would it be to tie together intelligence on the one hand and emotion on the other hand in the training of our therapists? Put it another way, what would it be to link science and art together explicitly throughout our training program? What would it be to tie together Naturswissenschaften and Geisteswissenschaften? Now I'm going to complete with this, and that is, I don't know of any body, much less the two of you, that more signify the spirit of this convergence. It's very difficult to pull off, and the two of you embody it as friends, as experts in so many different domains in the field, and I hope that you'll join me with gratitude, deep gratitude, both of you, and love, to welcome you today here to speak here at Cal Southern. Faith McClure, Ed Tiber, please join me in welcoming them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for welcoming us here, and we're very excited to talk with you about this work. It matters a lot to us. It means a lot to us. We sort of want to start with talking about the centrality of the Therapeutic Alliance. APA has looked at what are the key variables in treatment outcome, and repeatedly the Therapeutic Alliance is part of all evidence-based practice, regardless of the therapeutic model you're looking at. They've just come out and said it is the most critical component of treatment effectiveness. That it accounts for more variability in outcome than any other characteristic you can look at. It's effective across all treatment modalities, and it's more significant than any treatment model used. Many of you have heard sort of this phrase, you know, the dodo bird effect, the dodo bird verdict, that sort of says, you know, it's out of the Alice in Wonderland book that everybody has won and everyone must have prizes, which essentially is that if you look at treatment models, no one treatment model supersedes any other one. That when you look at treatment models, really it's kind of the common factors that really have meaning. That it's genuineness, that it's empathy, that it's congruence, unconditional positive regard, the ability to instill hope, the ability to meet clients' expectancies, that those factors are really the key in outcome, not the model you're using. And that if you don't have these features in the work you're doing, what you're doing in terms of technique, in terms of model, is not going to work. And even if you go and you look at a specific model, within a model, the failures in that model are because these factors are absent. So it's very clear when you look at treatment that these factors are very significant in outcome. Thousands of studies show that Alliance is so effective. It's just robust. It's consistent. It is the major feature. It's 5 to 7 times more effective if you look at specific studies, and more in other studies. So, you know, we're just kind of like saying it's really important. And we're not just looking at correlations. We're looking at predictiveness. So they've designed studies to look at prediction. And one of the things that predicts outcomes when they do studies where they're looking at prediction is if in the early part of your treatment you can form a treatment alliance, outcome is going to be good. So it predicts outcome. It's not just correlated with outcome, but it predicts outcome. So that's a really strong statement when you look at that. So one of the things that happens is if you have a strong alliance, clients are going to commit to treatment and they're not going to drop out prematurely. They're going to stay with you. Clients are going to be motivated to stay and work and do the work that we want to have happen. And of course, there are other variables that are part of the treatment, context, client support systems and clients presenting problems and all of that. But the alliance interacts with all of those to facilitate treatment outcome. So it's that important. So even looking at client characteristics, it interacts with all of those to impact treatment outcome. It's that important. So what are therapists to do to be effective? They have to be collaborative with their clients. And what does that look like? What does that mean? What do we mean to be collaborative? We need to work with clients to agree on what are the tasks, what are the goals. And so we need to work as fellow journeymen with our clients to agree on here are the tasks, here are the goals. And when the client feels you are a partner in this process, they will work more strongly, more effectively. They'll be motivated. And so the other part of it is you want to present for a client with participation, what is a rationale for why I'm struggling? So clients need a reasonable story for why they're there. And they need help making sense of what the problem is. And you are the partner who helps them make sense of their life, make sense of their life history, make sense of how they got to be where they are. And you're in partnership with them in giving them that story and working with them in making sense of their lives. And you are also a partner with them in talking about where they're going to go for healing. This is part of establishing a relationship of trust and hope, and the sense that we have a place to go. We have a strategy for healing. And this process motivates, commits them to stay with you and to be in this process with you. Okay. And this is really all part of this role induction. Many clients come to treatment knowing that they need help, but they don't really know what treatment's about. They don't really know how to go about using the treatment process. And part of role induction includes helping the client understand that this is a collaborative process, that you as a therapist are there to help them in their predicament, that you want to help them, that you are committed to them, that you grasp that they're in the process of struggling with some distress, that you believe that you can work productively together, that you grasp that they're here because they want change. And you need to be able to assess, yes, okay, where in the stages of change is this client? Can you meet them in that process, in that place where they are, and then do change talk with them in a collaborative and very empathic way. So they feel bonded with you, and they feel that you have real empathic understanding of their current situation. It's a real important process. We're going to talk a little bit more about this process of empathic understanding. So, you have some comments so far, Ed
Well, just to join in appreciating Faith's always articulate words here. She says it so well. We're saying people's problems developed in relationships, and that we think that the solutions to those problems are going to be in a therapeutic relationship. We're interested in an experiential relearning, or actually an old-fashioned term, corrective emotional experience. That us, the therapist, needs to respond in a new, different way to the theme, the pattern, the expectation that's come before. And we're going to do this especially through this working alliance. As Faith talks about working alliance and draws it out for you, just as teachers and counselor trainers, I think we both find that people often don't really grasp the deeper meaning of this. And it often comes across, at least to our trainees, as I think something Carl Rogers might resonate with, being nice. And what Faith's talking about here has nothing to do with being nice. It has to do with being empathic and being respectful and understanding or discerning in a very discriminating way the central feeling, the core meaning, the core or central meaning in what the client just said, and the ability to hear that and grasp that and reflect that with Faith's using this word, empathic understanding. It's connoting a warmth or a compassion, a non-judgmental response, but it also distills the essence of what they've just said. And that client, Faith just used that phrase, gets the experience that you, the therapist, get me. We like that phrase. You see me, you understand. Talking to you is not like talking to my hairdresser. This is different. And so this is not being nice. This takes a very discriminating and discerning response. And as we go on today, Faith and I thought we could role play this a bit and kind of demonstrate it. As you keep teaching and you go on, where you have all our words and talk about these things and think we're saying it well, but so often find that people don't really understand what we mean, or I guess schema or distortion or whatever. We slot things into boxes that don't always fit so well. So this empathic understanding and to us gives the therapist the credibility to the client that makes the glue or the potency in this working alliance. That the therapist does commit to the therapist and risk more when we demonstrate our understanding in this way. And maybe later when we kind of go through the talk, Faith and I can role play some maybe kind of prototypic therapist-client situations that we could bring up or you have, and we'll try and kind of put words to this and how we would sort of do this in practice.
Right. So really kind of to underscore that the therapist gets them, the therapist sees them, the therapist understands them, the therapist feels for them, the therapist is present and engaged with them. It's really important to feel that. And that this sense of engagement and presence is not just emotional, it's cognitive, it's also nurturing, it's warm, it's very sensitive to who they are. And one of the important things that we need to also convey to clients is that we have a belief that the client has had strengths to have survived whatever they've survived. And so we're going to work with them and with whatever strengths they bring in to move them to the next level. Because to be here, given whatever they've struggled with, means they've really survived a lot. And so we really do want to sort of convey, yes, whatever you've struggled with and however you are now makes sense in the context of your life situation. And you are who you are because of what you've had to do. And right now, it's no longer working for you, and we grasp that, and we get that. And now we're going to rethink that together. We're going to join with you in rethinking that, and working together, we're going to find new ways of being, new ways of responding, new ways of relating. So we see that you've survived, and we also see that you're looking for new ways of relating and being in this relational space. So that's part of it. doing that is going to increase the client's sense of safety. I'm safe here. I get seen not just as a weak person, not just as someone who's incapable, but I also get seen as someone who has distress but has the potential to move forward and to have change. And that makes me safe. So I can share everything about myself, including my shame and those things that I've not been safe to share with anyone else, because I'm not going to be seen as, quote unquote, a defective human being. I'm going to be held in a safe space. My client's not going to judge, my therapist is not going to judge me. My therapist is going to embrace all the parts of me. So I can disclose more, and I'm more willing to follow through with anything that is sort of a potential new risk, new way of trying out new ways of being. Because I feel safe and I feel secure in this relationship. And I'm more willing, both cognitively and emotionally, to explore new ways of being. This is a corrective experience, as Ed was saying. This is a new experience that I've never had before. The safety, this willingness now to try new ways of being and to share everything that I've been afraid to share before. I have a relationship of trust. I have a relationship of safety. And I'm now, having had compassion from a therapist, I can feel more compassion for myself. That's a new experience. I've not had compassion for myself because all my experiences have not been compassionate toward me. I now have a new way of seeing myself because someone else sees me with compassion. Where did we go? Okay, so what does an effective therapist look like? Well, actually, let's just stop here for a moment and maybe talk about sort of a client.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm a client and I come into therapy, and my presenting problem is I am anorexic. I'm losing weight. I don't want to eat, and Dr. Tiber, in my house, it's just, it's really hard to live in my house. My dad drinks a lot, and when he walks in the door, I just want to shrink because he comes in and he's always drunk and he just wants hugs and he just wants to be close to me, and I just can't stand it.
Oh, you're saying so much there, Susie. Your dad's drinking, he's maybe drunk, he comes in the house and he wants to hug you or be close to you, and this is just extremely, almost without words, this is just not right. This is very disturbing.
I just kind of sick to my stomach, and I just don't want to eat anymore. I just and I just feel better. I just feel better not eating. I don't want to go into the kitchen. I don't want to go in the house. I don't want to eat.
Yeah. Dad walks in the house and he's been drinking and he wants to hug you, and you've got this squeamish feeling, and I don't want to eat. Yes, Susie. Help me understand this. Dad wants to hug. There's this smell of alcohol. It just seems kind of too much, intrusive, overwhelming. What would be the right word, Susie?
It's just too much. He's overwhelming. He's just, and so I just kind of like, I'm just like nauseous all the time. I'm just sick to my stomach all the time.
Oh, it's heartbreaking to hear you say this. This is just physiologically, just your gut, you're just so disrupted by this. I have a word in my head. Help me. It's like I'm almost swallowed up or engulfed, or there's no safe boundary.
Whew. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I just, you know, as you kind of say that, I kind of like want to disappear.
Yes. So when I say that word, there's no boundary. This just deeply resonates with you, and it somehow seems to frighten you and lend hope for you. Your thoughts, Susie, when I say there's no boundary between you and your dad. We're just sort of all mixed up. I'm swallowed up, taken over. Those aren't your words. I'm just exploring your experience. But when I say boundaries, you really seem affected by that.
Kind of like if I stop eating, I'll just like disappear. I'll just kind of like shrink and go away.
Okay.
And there'll just be no more of me, and that's kind of the feeling.
Susie, as we work together here in treatment, I don't want you to go away from me, and I don't want you to go away from the world, and I don't want you to go away from yourself. And I think that should be one of our goals here in treatment, is to help you preserve a self. And maybe you're saying, when my dad walks in and he's been drinking and he wants to hug me, all I can do is go away. And if I'm following it correctly, there's just no boundary here that gives me the safety to be on the other side of my dad, a separate self from my dad, and have my own body, my own voice, my own capital S self. Am I saying that right, Susie? Help me say it better.
I can't breathe.
Yeah.
I stop
It's
breathing.
just suffocating. It's overwhelming. What's your word? I can't breathe.
I can't breathe. He takes up all the space.
Yeah.
He takes up all the space.
Yeah.
And I keep thinking, if I take up less and less space in the house, that
Yes.
maybe it will be better.
I see how you've tried your little heart out to cope here with this sort of elevator door that's shutting, or tidal wave that's just going to come over and take all the air out of the room. You've tried to shrink and not breathe and not eat and just get smaller and go away. And I'm hoping here with me you cannot do that. But you can sort of come back and have a voice and have a self in our relationship, and have the security of a boundary here, where it's you over there with your own mind and your own experience, and me over here respecting it and interacting with you, where we both can be two different people. And that and in that way, just as we're talking about how overwhelmed by your father you feel, that you don't feel overwhelmed by me as well. Can I check in about that?
Well, even right now, as we're talking, just the feeling I have is I just want to run. I just want to shrink. I just want to go away. I just want to hide. I just want to be gone. And you know, as we're talking, I kind of realize I stop eating because it's a way to just hide, to go away.
Yeah.
And even here, I'm just like backing up.
I love your honesty. You're telling me right now, here with me, you're backing up, sort of as you have to do at home and go away. Susie, I like images, and I want you to be safe here with me. And down the line, I want you to have more of a boundary and more of the safety to have your own self in your family. So just right now, I'm just making a little block wall here. And you are over there on the other side of this little block wall that I've just built, and there's a little gate in it, and I'm just handing you the key to the gate. And I'm over here on the other side of this little lovely English garden wall, but it is a safe boundary for you. Okay? So you're on the other side of this wall, and I'm over here. But I have not gone away, and I'm not intruding and coming after you. But I am saying, I hear you. I hear you wanting to withdraw and move away from me, and I'm inviting you to risk with the new safety of a real boundary here, where I'm not going to intrude or overwhelm, and you have control over whether I come in or not and how much. If you could do it differently with me right here now than you do with your dad at home. Can you stay connected to me, Susie, with the safety of this boundary?
I'm really afraid because at home, if I risk getting close, I get swallowed up. And the safest thing to do is to just shut out and go away.
What a poignant dilemma you've been in. If I try to engage, which of course you want to do, I lose myself. And I think there's almost a terror in that.
I'm horrified, I'm
Yes.
terrified.
And yet to go away, this shrinking and sort of starving yourself and needing nothing and not breathing and not eating, your whole self is just shrinking away and we're losing you, and I don't want to lose you. So I'm reaching out and wanting you to come close to me and other safe people, but without this threat that I or others are going to take you over. And so let's have this boundary here. I don't think there's been enough boundaries in your life that have been secure and stable. I can shut the bathroom door and nobody's coming in. I can shut the bedroom door and no one's going to come in. I can say no and my no stands.
When I say no in my family, they abandon me.
How painful. What a big problem for a little girl who wants to be close to her mom and dad and to want every child's birthright to be close, but to have this terrifying engulfment or loss of yourself to be paired with that. You have had to deal with a very big problem by yourself, Susie. Ouch.
Yeah. I'm thinking about it. I'm kind of afraid that if I get close to you, you're going to tell me what to think, and that if I just agree with you, you're not going to want to see me.
Yeah. Well, it makes sense to me that you have those expectations of me, but I hope as we continue to work together, you find that some people are different than the people in your family, or that I am different than your father. Because I like your own mind. I respect your limits and boundaries. And when you say no, or I disagree, or that's not right, I like that. I find that partnership. And two people who can both have their own minds. So I think in that way I may be different from some people you've known. But let me give you this, Susie. I like number ones, my little pointer finger. If at any point you think, I'm telling you what to do, I'm telling you what it means, I'm telling you what you should say, do, act, the choice you should make. If I'm taking over and overwhelming you or intruding in some way, I just want, you don't have to speak. Just go like this. Number one. Here's our number one problem. You have intruded on me. You have just knocked down my lovely garden wall and intruded in me, and you're trampling all over me, and all I can do is shrivel up and go away. If you go number one, I will literally or metaphorically take a step back until you feel safe. Like you can have your own self over there and I'm not intruding. How does my number one, can we kind of do that if it feels like I'm starting to do what others have done? If you're starting to feel swallowed up by me, you go number one. And maybe we'll even build the wall a notch or two higher.
I think it's hard for me to do some things, but I think what I'll do is I'm going to grab my purse and put it on my lap.
Let's do this your way. I love doing that, and that'll just be your own protective barrier that holds me and maybe your father and others, their needs, their demands, their expectations away. And that you can be safe then on the other side of your little purse barrier. And then you don't have to go away, and you don't have to stop breathing, you don't have to stop eating, you don't have to stop thinking. You can still be Susie, but safe behind that. I would just welcome that. That's such a good idea, Susie.
Will you still see me when I do that?
I'm going to like it when you do that.
How will I know?
I'm going to tell you that. I'm going to say you're putting up the barrier. You're working with me to change your life. You're saying, I'm not feeling safe, and rather than stop breathing, stop eating, withdrawing and going away, stop being a person, I am going to protect myself in this way. And you're telling me, I, Ed, am being too much, or intrusive, or making you feel unsafe. And you're not criticizing me, you are working with me collaboratively and saying, I need something different. And I'm going to do my very best to hear it. And probably a few times I will fail you, and you can tell me, but I think most of the time you're going to find, I really respect your barrier. And actually, I really like it, and I affirm it, and I support it. Because I really do.
And you'll say, I see it, and I'm not going away?
I will say that sentence. I will say, Susie, I see it, and I am not going away. And you are over there. We don't have a wall here. We got a purse. I love your healthy boundary you're defining for yourself. You're being very strong right now. You are not going away. You are coming towards me in the way you need. You are changing right now, Susie, with me in here, and I'm loving it. You're having a voice. You're having a self. You are not doing the anorexic withdrawal, can't breathe, panic attack thing. I'm loving what you're doing. I will stay with you and connected to you and not intrude or take over.
Okay, well, we'll see what happens.
Of course, you need to, I'm saying these words, but am I going to walk the walk?
Yeah.
Maybe I just talk good and I don't walk the walk. You need to find out if I mean what I say.
Okay.
And you need to sort that through and decide for yourself.
Okay.
And so we're going to be about that.
Okay, so essentially what we're sort of saying that authenticity in a therapist is really important, conveying empathy is really important. He could have stayed at anorexia, how thin are you, how much weight have you lost, and kind of gone into all this stuff that most people go into, like, you know, have you lost so much weight, and do we need to start getting you a medical exam, and that would have missed the point. The point is emotional anorexia, if you will. It's like I'm losing emotional self, emotional weight. It's emotional sense of self. That's where the real need is. And if I can have a voice and a self, then the weight issues don't have to play. I don't have to lose more weight because I'm having voice. And if I have voice, I can gain weight. And the warmth and the caring and the non-judgmental attitude, key. You know, affirming my struggle. It makes sense to me that you want to go away when you're struggling. It makes sense to me that this is overwhelming. And a sense of competence, that I'm here and I'm not afraid of your symptoms. I'm not overwhelmed by your symptoms. I'm here to work with you in that space. So that's part of being an effective therapist. And I can inspire hope and trust. There's hope here. We can work with this. And there's this genuineness about me. And I'm open to your solution. It doesn't have to be mine. It can be what you want. It can be the way you want it to be. We can do this in the way that you choose. You know, my barrier, that doesn't work for you. You prefer the purse, we'll go for the purse. Whatever your way is that works for you, that's what we'll do. So let's work it your way collaboratively. Really important, behavior and words must match. And so what's going to be key is over the weeks, I will test. I will make bids for, I don't think you get me, in subtle ways. I'm not going to do it in a big way. There'll be subtle tests. And it's going to be important that when I say no, that it's heard. When I say you don't see me, that it's heard. And that it's affirmed. Because it's not in my family. So this is really important, that congruence between what you say and what you do. He mentioned that there'll be times I might miss something. Key is to come back and repair those ruptures. They will, everyone's human. But if you repair a rupture, as soon as you recognize it, I missed that, I get it, I did miss that. Let's talk this through. Let's get that things get missed. And one of the things in repairing a rupture is you convey to the client that mistakes happen. It doesn't make you defective, it doesn't make you a failure, it makes you human. And clients get the sense that they can make mistakes and recover, and that that's okay. So this repair of ruptures is really important. And when they are countertransference issues, that those are managed to the best of your ability. And if you can't handle them on your own, that you find a colleague, you find someone to talk those through and manage those. It's really important to validate the client's reality, to validate and normalize their experiences. As I said earlier, people respond the way they do because of their life experiences. They are where they are because of what they've had to deal with. Susie is anorexic because this is what she's had to do to survive in her environment. So we want to contextualize this and then work with that and really sort of say, given what you've had, this has been the survival. And let's find a new way of making things work differently and better for you. And it's really important to be attuned and help clarify what's going on so that there's the opportunity to think about alternative responses. So look at what's going on, clarify what's working and what's not working, and then come up with alternatives together in partnership. Cultural issues are really important. It's really important to think about what is this client's sort of cultural context? Where do they come from? What works for someone from this kind of background? We need to really contextualize people's life situations. If someone lives in a high violent, crime-filled neighborhood, to immediately say, you've got separation anxiety disorder when you don't want to leave your house. Well, that's really missing the point. Leaving home is dangerous. Anxiety for this 7-year-old leaving home makes a lot of sense. That is adaptive. So we really need to be sensitive to the cultural context that the person is in. We need to be sensitive to the fact that if someone's taking the bus to come to therapy and the bus is late, we can't call that resistance. We can't jump to that conclusion. So we really need to be sensitive to what the person brings into therapy. What are the values and the beliefs of their cultural background? We really need to be aware. Context is something that we often miss. We very easily talk about family, but what is the family embedded in? What is the family's social-cultural context? What are the family's belief systems? And if the family's belief systems are fueling some of the struggles that the individual is bringing in, we need to be sensitive to how they then deal with family issues. We live in a Western culture where we sort of talk about autonomy. What does autonomy mean given this background that maybe emphasizes the family as a unit and family survival is the primary focus? Well, let's address that and see what it means for this individual and how they can work given the family's values and whatever their individual values are, not your values. And that becomes really an important feature when you're looking at people coming from different cultures. Do not impose your values. be sensitive to their values, and talk about what the rub may be for them as they try to negotiate maybe a system that does not value their values, and how to negotiate that. So be really sensitive to that, because and culture is not just ethnicity, it's religious beliefs, it is gender issues, there are a number of factors. It's the part of the country you live in, all kinds of things play a role. You come from the East Coast and you come to the West Coast. Well, directness on the East Coast is very different than directness on the West Coast. And living in different coasts will make a difference to how people are perceived, So helping that person negotiate living in a different context is really important. But as the therapist, you work with it because you will experience it in this relationship, and you can be helpful. Here's my experience, and as I say that, how do you feel? As I describe that to you, how does that sound to you? Is this the feedback you get from your friends? So let's talk about that, and let's work with that together, and you decide how you want to be in the relationships that you're in out there. It's really important to do that. By providing this holding environment, clients can hear feedback that is wide and varied, because they're safe, they trust you, they have a person that they can tell anything to. They can talk about just about anything and know they won't be shamed, they won't be judged, they won't be ridiculed. It's really crucial. So the two things that are really important. The therapist serves as a safe haven, which is the therapist is someone they can bring their distress to, they can bring their needs to, they can bring whatever it is, they can bring their shame to, they can bring their struggles to, whatever it is that they have struggled with. You are the safe place. And sort of like if you think of developmentally, a little kid needs a parent to come to when they fall, when they hurt themselves, when they have a need, and when they have whatever the need is. Safe haven. They also need a therapist who's a secure base. So a therapist from whom they can spring out and begin to risk trying out new ways of being. And if they falter, if they struggle, they have someone to come back to and say, try that, it didn't work, help me rethink this. Therapist helps them widen the menu of options. From the therapist's secure base, they can venture out and begin to try out new ways of being, new ways of relating, new ways of thinking, new ways of feeling. This is adolescence. We want our adolescents to grow and develop, and we want them to do it while they're in the safe haven of home, right? Part of what a therapist is going to do is you need to be a safe person for your client to begin to think about options, to think about alternatives, to clarify and then explore new ways of relating, new ways of behaving, new ways of thinking. This is the secure base. And that's a really important part. Both need to be there. And as therapists, we need to encourage this exploration and not shame a client if something doesn't work out. We need to be able to be there for the client. Would you join me here?
Yeah, I think we are often framing or trying to understand people's problems in terms of safe haven and secure base. Family therapy people, family systems call it the separateness, relatedness, dialectic. Lots of different, in every theoretical orientation, I think people are kind of talking about it. But it's Faye's saying, when we're vulnerable or distressed or afraid or in need, we need to have a safe haven. an attachment figure, a caregiver, a therapist, who sees and registers attuned responsiveness, gets our distress and vulnerability. We're sort of tying this back to our working alliance, that this is how that working alliance gets started, is that the therapist sees and hears the client's distress and provides that safe haven. And some therapists do this better than others. Some are kind of dismissive or don't really want to hear it or can't, or want to almost exaggerate the distress or minimize the distress. And we want to sort of accurately, without over or under amping it, with attuned responsiveness, grasp the distress, the fear, the vulnerability, see it, hear it, contextualize it, as Faith is saying, in the context of your life, your current circumstances, and in a developmental and familial perspective as well. The distress they bring to us makes sense. And we can put it in that bigger context. We are more accurately hearing the meaning of what they're saying. And many clients who enter in came without that safe haven, and in this corrective emotional or reparative relationship with the therapist, they need to find it. And actually, I think therapists often do that pretty well. But the other half of this coin that Faith's talking about is the secure base. We are kind of an attachment-informed therapist, if you will. We like all these theories and see strengths in every one of them and limitations in every one of them. But with the attachment story here that Faith is presenting to you so nicely, people often just think of it as safe haven. And they miss the other half of the nickel that Faith is saying. And I think many clients developmentally miss this. I think many therapists, as we supervise them, don't sort of get the secure base side of it. When Faith is over there role-playing Susie and saying, no, I don't want your idea, Ed, of a wall. I don't like walls. I want my purpose. I want this. That's her words, her idea on her terms. I don't give her a secure base. If I don't, so she's saying at that moment, here's my idea. Here's my little self. Here's how I want to do things. This is an aspect of her own autonomy, her own differentiation, a la Bowen, from my idea. Okay? She's making it her own. And if I don't join that as a therapist, I'm not providing a secure base, a place where she can have the experience that in this relationship you can see me, hear me, care for me, register for me, and you can have your own self and your own mind and your own independence and your own autonomy and your own developmental thrust up and out and on into your life. And I think we often get on one side of this nickel or the other, and we miss both. And as we supervise students, we're often seeing the student therapist stuck on one side or the other, and often repeating, reenacting, we use the word recapitulating, for the client's developmental problem in their family, where there wasn't permission to come close and be safe, with our Susie here a minute ago, and get swallowed up. But if I set a boundary, I'm all alone. There's not someone connected to me and supportive of me in my differentiation or autonomy or having my own voice. No, I don't like your wall. I want my purse. Oh, well, that's a great way for us to do that. Let's put that purse there. That's going to be the barrier. That's going to be the way you're telling me this. So you can be close to me, and at the same time, you can be separate and different from me. You can be connected or related or safe haven attachment, but also you have permission to step away, to have a boundary, to see it differently, to have your own mind, to emancipate and launch from the family of origin. People tend to get stuck on one or the other side of this. I think counter-transferentially, therapists tend to do one side or the other side of this better. Our clients need both.
Let's stop for a minute here and sort of welcome questions and take some questions before we sort of... Yes.
Excellent.
Well,
no,
can
go,
I do
please.
some of the online
No.
people first? That's fine.
Someone dream Mike.
Okay.
Hi, thank you so much for your talk. I think you've hit some very important points. My name
What's
is,
your name?
My name is Diana Trout. I am enrolled in Psychology 87524. That's Cognition, Emotion, and Motivation. And I typically feel like I'm an experienced therapist. I do a lot of the things normally, But I wanted to know if you could speak to some of the harder, more difficult clients, the borderline narcissistic, especially, I've got some angry narcissistic clients that are, they don't really come necessarily saying, I have a problem. They're saying, when someone comes in and says, I have a problem, you can join with them because they're experiencing their own distress. These personality disorder clients often are distressed because they say, my spouse is the problem or my life is the problem. Could you speak a little more to how you deal with that when someone is being, I have a client that's particularly hostile in session with me a lot when I'm even trying to be, calm and empathic. It's just his relating style. And yes, he needs a different way. So I'd love to hear what you have to say about that.
I'll go first, and Faith, you'll
Sure.
voice first. Why don't you, just for a minute, to bring everybody in this experientially, why don't you be that client and you come at me in a hostile way, or you come at me in this externalizing way, she, he. Why don't you just do that with me for a little minute? And let me say, and so chapter 4 of this interpersonal process book is called An Internal Locus for Change. And many, many clients, and Access 2 people in particular, but many, many people are going to talk about the problem out there with other people. And we're going to try and change it to, that dialogue isn't going to go very far. And with some people, we have to begin there and can't do more. But we're looking for every opportunity to change it from out there to inside you and between you and me.
Got it.
So here we're going to go to, we're very much here, dash, and, dash, now, or process-oriented, or sort of in the counseling literature, like Clara Hill type people, immediacy interventions. We find these are very effective ways to work with what you're talking about. And not that this is simple and quick and easy, and I don't want to cast it that in any way. It's challenging work. But we find these are very helpful ways to make this a conversation or a dialogue or an interaction that's going to go someplace. As long as the client's talking about him and her out there, we're not going to go anywhere. As long as you're giving me the hostility that you give to everybody else, this isn't going to be a new or corrective or different relationship. We have to change this pattern of interaction here and now in our current interaction. So we're not just oriented to ideas, cognitive reframing or interpretation or all these things we like, but we are trying to change the problematic relational pattern right here in our real interaction. Does that solve the problem? No. We think of it as a precondition for change. If I can alter the hostility you give and present to me and alter that, I think we can pretty easily start to generalize that to some significant others in your life. That's sort of the sequence we go to. So be hostile with me, be externalizing, and give me a very hard time, but don't be impossible, okay?
Now, wait a minute. Okay, so just to set the stage, this gentleman is extremely rigid, and reliability is kind of his hot button issue, okay? And his wife showed up 30 minutes late after when she said she was going to be there, and he went to a lot of effort to make sure that dinner was ready on time because she was bringing a guest home. Okay, so that sets the stage a little bit. Well, how am I supposed to feel like she's reliable? Because here she was, she said she was going to be there and she wasn't, and that is just, I feel so let down. That was terrible.
Mm-hmm. She was going to be there and you were expecting that. And Bob, you really felt let down. Bring me in on that let down feeling.
Well, yeah, how am I supposed to depend on somebody like that? Because, you didn't even call. He's looking at his wife. You didn't even call. It's just ridiculous. And I feel like you're telling me as the therapist, it's like, now I'm supposed to be okay with that? How am I supposed to not even be true to myself and my own standards? Yeah. What kind of therapist are you telling me that this thing is very important to me? Reliability and trust, that is it for me.
I really appreciate what you're doing with me right now, Bob. You're just being so honest and direct with me. You're saying, I'm not helping you.
Yeah.
You're saying, I'm not understanding you and hearing you, and I'm trying to make you not care about what you care about. This is going to help our work together. I like your straight talk. I like that you tell me right now this isn't working.
Well, I don't like what you're saying, and I just want to tell you that because, I mean, you're telling me not to be true to myself, and I can't do that.
Yeah. You know, I think we're having a misunderstanding. Because no part of me believes or thinks that you or I or anybody else should not be true to themselves. So I think there's a misunderstanding going on.
Well, you know, when I'm angry at her, that is me being true to myself. Because I need to tell her how disappointed I am.
Yeah, I hear you. That this, when they don't come through for you and they don't do what they say they're going to do, this makes you very mad.
And you do it too. You do it too.
Oh.
All right, you think you're so brilliant. You tell me what you think.
Ooh. Bob, I'm feeling like I'm not being seen right now. I don't think of myself as brilliant.
Why would I want to see you? I mean, you're doing the same thing to me.
What am I doing that's familiar and old and unwanted? What am I doing that's like everybody else?
It's just like it's like I can't be seen.
Yes.
What's important to me isn't important to other people, and I don't understand. All I want is reliability and trustworthiness.
Yeah. Well, we're going two places here. Let's go one at a time. You're saying, I'm not seeing you. I'm not hearing you. And I get that you don't like that. And I do want to see you. And I do want to hear you. And I don't want to talk you out of your feelings. So help me see where I have missed you and not heard you. And if I have missed that, let me get on that dime. Because I do not want to dismiss your experience or miss it. I'm trying to hear it. And right now I want to hear it. Why don't you tell me, as simply and directly as you can, when he's not there, you're standing on the street corner, he's late, what are you feeling? How is that for you? And bring me in on that, because I do want to join you right there, Bob.
You know, I've told you so many times about this that I just feel so disappointed and let down. And it pisses me off.
Yes, okay.
So yes, Bob, so like right
angry.
now it feels like like everybody else in your life has let you down. And that I too, like all the other important people in your life, do not give you what you need. That you are alone on that corner. You are not heard. You are not listened to.
I try
You are
so
alone.
hard. I try so hard with everything I do, and I don't understand why other people don't try just as hard as I do.
Yeah. Does it feel like I am trying hard right now to hear you?
Well, I hear your words, but, I feel like here you want me to be all wishy-washy. I am anything but wishy-washy.
Yeah. Bob, that's not going on in my mind, Bob.
It's okay, honey. I understand you had to be late. Then it's like, that's just wishy-washy. I am not going to be like that. That is not me.
Bob, I haven't said that word to you. I haven't said that sentence to you.
I know
You
that's
might
what
be
you
thinking
mean.
I'm thinking that, but I haven't said or done that with you. And you know what? I'm not thinking that.
All right, well.
I hear
Tell me
that
what
when
you're
they
thinking.
don't come, you feel alone. And I'm trying to ask you,
It's not just alone, I'm let down.
You are let down. Bring me in. Would you not push me away, but would you risk bringing me in on what it feels like to be let down? And let me try and hear you and join me.
I am so angry
Yeah,
with everybody.
right. Angry with everybody and angry with me, and maybe feeling let down here by me as well.
Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
I haven't really been. I used to come here and I used to feel safe, and now I just feel let down.
Yes, yes. And I'm hearing that. You are disappointed in me, you are angry at me, and I, Ed, too, like your husband and others, are letting you down and disappointing you. But I'm saying, I take this seriously. I am hearing you. I don't feel defensive. I want to enter into this and hear you and get your experience and not change you.
We're getting off the point. The point was she was late, and we're not talking about that. Why are we focusing on me right now when you need to be dealing with her and her unreliability?
Because you're telling me that I'm letting you down, Bob. That's why I'm talking about you and me.
I know,
you're
but
saying,
I wouldn't be feeling that if she was showing up on time. We wouldn't even
Okay.
be talking about this.
I'm having trouble because I'm getting two different messages. One, talk about him, but then you also say, I'm having a problem with you, Ed. And so I'm trying to get this straight between you and, why don't we do this? Why don't we get this straight between you and me first, Bob, and then we'll go to you and your wife?
Oh, please. This, I came here to talk about what she did,
Yes.
and now you're turning it on me.
I am asking about your experience and what goes on for you when she lets you down.
We've already said that.
Okay. Yeah. What would be a better way to go?
We need to deal with her. At least she needs to call me when she's going to be late. Don't you think that's just being considerate? Don't you want people to be considerate?
Yeah. So what would you like to say then? So let's leave you and me. And
I told you this guy's really tough.
Yeah. So let's
This
leave
is
you and me.
typical.
What would you like to say, Bob? What would you like to say to Susie when you feel let down? What would be what do you usually do, and how does that work for
Well,
you?
I usually just say, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. In a real sarcastic way.
Yeah.
Because that's how I show her how disappointed and angry I
Yeah.
am.
How does she usually respond when you come across with that anger and sarcasm?
Well, she just shuts down and goes away, and then I feel more alone.
Right, right. So it's just kind of like falling down a spiraling cliff of getting more and more alone. Can I take a big risk with you?
Sure.
I want to say something that could make you more mad, or it could hurt your feelings, or make you feel criticized. But all I'm trying to do is help you. I have good intentions. Okay? Can I take a risk?
Okay.
I think I'm starting to have the same feeling that Susie has, and maybe your daughter has, and maybe other people in your life has. And I'm starting to feel that even if I try to hear or try to join, that no matter what I do, I'm doing the wrong thing. And so I would think that Susie and Bob, and if I wasn't your therapist but met you in the line at Vaughn's, a lot of people would want to, by their nature, spit back or moonwalk back out of here, both of which kind of leave you more alone. And but I don't want to do that with you. I want to stay engaged and not move away from sarcasm or anger. And so maybe you and I could talk about the impact you have on the other when you feel alone. And maybe in here in treatment, we could try and find better ways for you to communicate your feeling of aloneness other than through anger or blame or sarcasm. What do you think of that, Bob?
Thank you so much. I'm sorry, it was really difficult. But honestly, I think you did an excellent job, and as well as anybody could. And I do think that that is where this, and when he's calmer, he can do that.
What am I doing, or what am I trying to illustrate as we role play in your eyes?
Well, I think you were trying to empathize with this struggle, and you were trying to bring it in the room for
Between
this,
you and me.
between you and I.
And I'm trying to talk about the experience I have of you. We can
Yes.
call it a self-involving
And help him
comment.
have more self-awareness of his impact on others, because until he has that that awareness,
People
he's
like
not
Phony
in
are going to
enough
call
pain
that
he's
a
willing to
reflective
change.
capacity,
Yeah.
the ability to step out of my experience and see my impact on others and how other people experience me. And when Faith's talking about common factors across all treatment approaches that help, Fonagy and others talk about empathy, genuineness, warmth, and reflective capacity. That effective therapy of any approach helps the client be able to step back from this embedded, schema-driven, I'm alone, you've let me down, and I'm angry, and we just keep doing this, but to be able to disembed from that and consider it from different perspectives. I think the immediacy, here and now, you and me intervention is a way to facilitate that. As we're role-playing it, it ain't simple, it ain't clean, it doesn't just move down some simple route, but I'm optimistic that you and I are going to get around the block. Faith, your thoughts?
And over time, as you begin to separate the anger at her being late versus the experience he's having internally, as well as the experience he's having with you, to go to that internal experience, you begin to rework his internal experience, and he begins to look inward to what's going on for him, and you can work that in his experience with you. And when he starts to look at his responsivity and how he feels let down and has felt let down in so many contexts, and his reactivity has to do with what's gone on internally, he then can rework that and really come to the shame that's underlying this letdown, because that's really what often narcissism is about. But he'll be able to do it in working with you.
I'm not worthy of your response to me.
Yeah.
When you don't show up, it's evidence that I don't matter, I'm small,
Yes.
I'm unimportant,
I'm
I'm
worthless.
insignificant.
I'm insignificant.
Yeah. We're very oriented to shame and shame
Thank you so
dynamics
much.
so often.
Would you like to take another question or two?
Yes, yes.
Hello, my name is Steve Holliday in accounting 87530. I'm in the DBA program. I also have a JD. And I have found that in leadership positions, a lot of the theory and practice that you just mentioned apply to all the various parties with whom one works in the business environment. And I've also found at Cal Southern that many of the courses I've taken have psychological aspects to them which are very important to apply in understanding people. And in understanding people, being respectful, courteous, ethical, in a genuine sense, words and actions, I've found will take one further than almost anything else. So my question is, in your experience, have you been able to apply your theory and practice in the business environment? And could you share that with us? And I promise no role playing. Thanks.
I do work in the community, and so part of the work that I do in the community is not necessarily business, but it's with agencies, and working with agencies and helping agencies interact with each other. That's where that has been very useful. So when there's conflict between different agencies or a shift in leadership in an agency, that's where I've actually come in and worked as a consultant to help them restructure an agency that's falling apart, or where the agency is having difficulty because of the leadership structure in an agency. And a lot of these agencies are either nonprofits, or they're also mental health agencies, or they're substance abuse agencies. Those kinds of agencies, leadership falls apart, and then I go in and these principles really work very well at helping them resolve the conflict and resolve the issues that have come into play.
I do it in a business sense. I've actually almost moving out of professor. My university has a thing called a foundation board, so they run everything on the campus has to do with money. There's 9 restaurants on our campus. There's $20 million in grants and contracts. There's a bookstore that does $5 million of business a year. There's a child care center. There's parking pigs, that charge students $50 for so all the things with money at a university, right, is a big business. Yes? So I was a faculty representative to that, and talking as I talk, they made me president of the foundation board 12 years ago. It was always a rotating 2-year term. For the last 12 years, I've been president of the foundation board at Cal State San Bernardino. And I sit there with financial planners and accountants and attorneys, and I'm the process person or the mediator, and I run the meeting and I do what we're talking about here. I'm into straight talk, and I want to get to the problem and the issue, and I don't want to shame anybody, and but I also don't want to let real problems go untended, and I'm trying to work both sides of that. And to my amazement, they keep re-upping me for a 2 more year term as president of the foundation board. All business people. So yes, I find this is just a good way to be with people. People like straight talk.
Yes, they do.
And it's respectful.
And they can tell you by your words and your actions if you are or not.
Yes.
Congratulations, by the way, on your reappointment.
Actually, I like it.
For your comments, very well taken.
We call it process versus content.
Yes.
And the content is what we talk about, and the process is the way we do it. And those two have to be congruent. And they usually aren't in dysfunctional families. And most of the clients that bring problems to us, there's been a mixed message, or what occurred at one verbal level did not match some other behavioral level, and it's kind of undoing and confusing and undermining of efficacy and sort of what's real. And then symptoms like anxiety and depression get bigger.
Okay, we have another question over here.
Hi, my name is Jessica McNabb. I am in the organizational development class and the IO program here in the doctorate program. And I wanted to touch base with Faith on a point you made earlier. It's kind of something that Dr. Weathers and I have talked about in length, about when you're in session as a new therapist, you are more concerned, for example, in your role as the anorexic client. The therapist, beginning new, would come in and be overly concerned with the fact that you're losing weight and have medical on the brain. And so I want to know from your all's experience and research how you encourage the therapist to be mindfully aware of what is their driving force in therapy, what is causing them to make the decisions that they are, and more importantly, how you empower them to make the decision to not miss the boat per se on what the real issue is.
Right. I find it really important, I supervise lots of students and lots of beginning students, and I encourage them to ask about the context in which those behaviors are occurring. Because once you contextualize a problem, you very quickly see that the problem that's on the surface is often symbolic of a deeper issue and something that means more than what you see at first blush. And so when someone comes in and says, I'm not eating, tell me more about that and tell me when it started and why you're coming in now. And when you begin to do that, you begin to sort of see, I'm being overwhelmed. I can't breathe anymore. My mother keeps asking me to be her best friend. She wants me to do everything with her, and I just can't stand it. They want me to do all this with them, and I just need more space. And as soon as I start hearing that, it really becomes like, why now? And when did it start? Or what started and what was happening in the environment when this symptom began? That often gives you a huge clue about what the symptom means. And it's really, what does the symptom mean, that really clues you in to what's really important. Does that kind of give you, yes? Okay.
What a penetrating question.
Yes.
We think this is just so crucial.
Yes, yes. So often the symptom means something, and it's like, I want to get away from something. I want to respond to something that's more distressing. There's something bigger going on in my life that I can't handle, and my symptom is just a symbolic way of managing this bigger issue in my life.
Just to follow up with you, how is it that you encourage supervisors to also not focus on that medical portion, supervisors in a practicum experience, and to really you know, obviously we reiterate, and we reiterate throughout our education and also in our practicum and internship experiences, and when we first start out and continuing on in our professional lives, the importance of, you know, following our practices and protecting licensure and ethics and morals and all those things. But how do we really, as supervisor, do you teach supervisors to empower their students to be mindfully aware and to really approach these therapeutic practices and engage them and have that strong, successful bond?
My experience is that if you think of your first few sessions as building the alliance, that if that's what you do in those first couple of sessions, your client is going to tell you what the real problem is. And it's just so repeatedly the case. And so I tell my supervisees, your job this session 1, is to build a place where the client feels emotionally held and safe. And if you do that, the client walks in and says, I'm anorexic, but by the end of the session, they feel safe and they say, actually, I don't feel safe at home. I'm overwhelmed by my life. And it's that safety, that emotional holding. So if your goal in that first few sessions is providing a safe space, it very quickly goes to what the real problem is. And that's been my experience, you know, in 20-some years of 25, whatever years of being a clinical supervisor.
Can I piggyback there? You've got an issue that we just think is just very central to effective therapy and clinical training, and Faith's saying it so well. But what we often see, Faith saying if we provide safety in here, the client will take this presenting problem that is connected to, but not really the, like with our eating disorder here. It wasn't really about food and the little eggs she's putting in little cellophane packages. As the client goes to the deeper problem, we so often find, I think, by our socialization. And so many people who go into counseling are women, and we often deal with 20-something who've been strongly socialized to be nice. Okay? And I think part of that is often keeping things friendly and nice and on the surface. And we often find that the client is very explicitly and overtly, after they're providing kind of the safety and the context that Faith is talking about, the client starts to say bigger feelings. I have breast cancer, I'm afraid I'm going to die. I think my father so-and-so drank too much and sometimes maybe touched me in ways I don't know, I'm not sure. And they trail off. The client takes you to bigger and central issues that hold huge affect and life-shaping meaning. And again and again and again, we hear the beginning counselor fail to join the client at that point. The therapist doesn't want to hear the depth of the pain, the depth of the violation, the heartbreaking. If you really think about that, you just kind of want to throw up meaning in what the client just said and keep it back to a more superficial level. That's why we don't like to talk about COGB, client-centered, existential. We're not so interested in theories. They all have something to offer. There's effective and ineffective therapists within each theoretical orientation. And our field is only just now starting to go to that. But we're thinking that effective therapists across differing orientations, when that client says the bigger meaning, they hear it and they join. And so often we, just to repeat it, that therapist takes it back up to a problem solving or more superficial or advice giving, and they move away from the big affect and the big meaning. And to me, this is the hub of clinical training, is to help the counselor grasp that deeper, bigger meaning. And often they'll say, well, I don't think the client was ready to go there. And I need to let the relationship develop. And I'm saying, I don't want you to intrude and lead the client to that, but that's not what's happened here. The client has took you to it. They took you from the elevator down to ground 4, and you pushed the button and took it back up to ground level 2. Faith, can you help me say this better?
And so when the client says, you know, I think my father came in and they were drunk and blah, 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 but you sort of say, oh, let's go back there for a minute. Let me join you in this. Let's talk about what that was like for you when you fought. Do not let it slide. They're telling you there was something here that's really, really uncomfortable and that maybe they feel shame about, and they're going away because they're not sure you're ready to join them there. And you need to say, I am. I'm ready, willing, present, engaged, and want to join you in that space. You don't have to be alone with it anymore. I want to join you. I want to be your collaborator in the space. Don't be alone with it anymore. And you really need to do it right then. And that is so crucial. Otherwise, they are alone with it once again because they sensed that you were too afraid, you were scared, you were uncomfortable.
You were just like my mom. You didn't want to hear it.
Yeah.
And then the therapist-client relationship is right now repeating or reenacting the developmental problem and not providing a new and reparative and corrective response to it.
Yes.
This is where the story is. You put us right at the hub of the therapeutic wheel, I think.
Very important.
Hi, my name is Gia Hamilton. Hi, Faith and Ed. They both were my profs way back when. Just off of what she just asked, you talked about taking the elevator down when the client brings you down to the 4th floor underneath that ground level. It goes back to that scenario there where the risk really felt like, Ed, what you were taking was to say, it's here with me and you went there. How do you help, and what are your recommendations in terms of the therapist being able to go to that 4th level and stay there? Because the risk was that self-involvement. I'm feeling this from you, and being able to be in there. So just what are your experiences and what recommendations in terms of the therapist being able to stay, go to that 4th level, hear that you're on that 4th level, and stay there and be there with the client?
It's a great question. Maybe we can both answer. Faith, you want to go first?
No, go ahead.
I think that feelings of inadequacy are activated for the therapist. There's this pain, there's this shame, there's this fear. I don't know what to say. I'm overwhelmed. I don't know how to handle it. I'm going to do the wrong thing. My supervisor isn't going to like what to do. This is too much. Feelings of inadequacy are routinely evoked for the therapist at that point. And separately, feelings of unrealistic feelings of responsibility. I've somehow caused her to be crying. I've somehow caused this pain, and I somehow have to fix it and take it away. Okay? And I think both these things get activated countertransferentially in the therapist, and they immobilize and make the therapist ineffective. And so can I go back to what Faith was telling us at the beginning? Can I hear attuned responsiveness is what the attachment people say, or a holding environment. All I need to do is to be able to simply hear it, and with some compassion and with some respect, demonstrate my understanding by reflecting the meaning and feeling in what they've just said. Your father comes in and he's drunk and he puts his arm around and he hugs you, and it's just a very sickening, squeamish feeling. This makes sense to me. I hear you. Tell me more, Susie. Well, in a way, pause, I haven't said a whole lot there, but what I've said is different. I'm not saying no problem. It'll be okay. I'm not saying he's a monster. I am just staying with your experience, trying to hear it and say, I can see your experience, I can tolerate this disturbing story, and I can be with you in it. It's what Faith was saying. You're not alone. You have someone who's now different than probably literally anybody else in your whole 48-year-old life who has been able to listen to you and hear you and take you seriously and not dismiss it or elevate it. And I can be with you in it. And all I'm doing is empathic understanding and validation. And it sounds simplistic, and it's good as gold, and there's way too little of it in this world, and there's way too little of it in therapeutic practice. So the therapist doesn't have to solve it and fix it and do all these things, but can I give an empathic and validating response to whatever hot material the client brings to me. And if I do that, I'm responding to the client in a new and different way. A corrective emotional experience is underway. I'm just confirming their expectations, how this overwhelms other people. Other people don't want to hear this. Other people think I feel sorry for myself. All that's disconfirmed. And I think it's that simple.
I have just a comment sort of to follow up. I think, Gia, the key for me is that the therapist needs to have done their own work and to have a self-awareness. If you have self-awareness, you can be genuine, you can be open, you can be present. And it's about being fully present in order to be able to respond to a client of this sort. Because you can't be able to respond to a hostile or angry or sad or whatever client without being open and present yourself. Otherwise, your stuff interferes. So if you've done your work and you are self-aware and you are genuine and authentic and present, then whatever the client is bringing in, you feel it and know it and can, with authenticity, respond to it. That would be my thought. Okay.
Thank you. I wanted to ask you both about this. Maybe more specifically, how do you recommend that therapists in training or therapists that are out of training cultivate these qualities you're talking about, this kind of authenticity, this kind of self-awareness? If you could be a bit more specific. I know that we're in the same spirit on this. I'd love to hear you elaborate.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of it comes from, I really think therapists need to do their own work. I think it's really important so that they develop their own, I mean, you know, when we talk about self-compassion, you need to be able to go and work on your own stuff so that you can develop a sense of self that is open and can be genuine and can be present. So I think self-awareness is just a really important thing. And we all have stuff that we bring to the table, and it needs to be worked on, it needs to be clarified. Everyone's going to have countertransference, and it's not that you should not, you have it. It's a given, but an awareness of it. So I think it's really important to be aware of what you bring to the table and what you have. And then I think, you know, as people who are doing training, you know, to be really attuned and help our trainees with listening skills, with empathic skills, with the ability to really pay close attention, to develop these reflective skills. It's just so key. And in our training, in the way we train our students, we do a lot of videotape training. And we look at portions of video and we then give feedback and we talk about what happened and what they thought about what happened. And we kind of do a lot of role plays around that and highlight, you know, an empathic response, an attuned response, those kinds of things. It's really helpful, especially in the beginning of training, to give that detailed feedback and help the trainee learn how to become their own supervisor, if you will, by giving that detailed feedback.
I'm just resonating with what Faith says, a way I symbolize kind of what Faith says. When I teach, every January I start a winter quarter practicum, first year students. I walk into that class, year after year I do the same thing the first day. I get a magic marker, I go up to that bulletin board, and I write a word on the top left of the bulletin board, and I write non-defensive. And I put a little box around it, and it stays up all quarter. We meet Monday, Wednesday, Friday for 10 weeks. 30 sessions, at some point I'm pointing to that word non-defensiveness, so that we can kind of do what Faith just said and what you know and understand so well, Bob, that we can be non-defensive enough to enter into my wish to spit back at you or my wish to move away from that because it evokes things in me. and my own history that aren't. So I just have to have the non-defensiveness to be able to think about and feel about and talk about and share with appropriate instructors or supervisors or colleagues or therapists what has been evoked in me by the client's material. And if I can do this, we're going to go just fine. And if I can't, we're going to end up reenacting and repeating aspects of the client's problems in our current relationship.
If I could add just one comment. If I could just add one comment, sometimes it helps me to realize it's important, in fact, it's necessary that the client replay out their scripts from childhood, even the dysfunctional ones. Those are the ones that have to get replayed out. Otherwise, how are we going to have an opportunity to change those scripts? So that helps me to have empathy for the individual rather than react to it.
They inevitably replay them.
Well put.
They inevitably replay them, yes.
We're closing in on about 20 minutes. Would you like to, did you have more material to go to? Would you like to continue to take some questions from the virtual audience?
I think we're doing, let's do what we say with clients. We like to be collaborative. We can stand up here and talk and use our words and all that forever, but it might be more fruitful if we were more collaborative and went to that.
Right.
Faith, do you have a preference?
So we could talk about the treatment model that we work with, or we could take questions. So
what's best for you guys?
We have a number from the virtual audience that we haven't gotten to. I'd like to
That'd be great.
work a few in.
Let's do that.
This one's from a doctoral student regarding building alliances. To what extent, if at all, would you encourage self-disclosure? For example, I've lived through divorce or addiction. I can empathize. I've lived through what you're going through.
Okay. Well, I'll just have a few thoughts.
Start us out.
I think that you have to be thoughtful about self-disclosure, and that you only disclose to the extent that it's in the client's best interest. That's the only time you self-disclose. If it's in the client's best interest and you think it's going to help strengthen an alliance, it's going to give clients some alternative ways of thinking about something, and you frame it as, here are some possibilities. And so you do it only to facilitate clients broadening the menu of options. So you have to be really cautious. You know, is it in the client's best interest? Is it strengthening our alliance? Is it broadening the client's way of thinking about things? So to that extent, self-disclosure can work, but you have to be really cautious. Who is your client? And is this a client who is wanting self-disclosure because there's some issues in this client's background where self-disclosure is going to be not good for this client, given the client's background? So you have to be really thoughtful about who the client is before you self-disclose.
We have the phrase client response specificity. So my client here is a parentified child and grew up being her mother's confidant and best friend and all that. And if I start to self-disclose to her, I'm repeating her childhood experience. And this is a reenactment. If I have a child who grew up ignored, not attended to, nobody shared with them, that same self-disclosure would have a very different meaning to that different client. So we are not rule-bound about how we respond. The old-fashioned word is idiographic, or we use this word client respondent. We're going to try and tailor our responses to this particular person. We don't talk about clients, or black people, or white people, or men, or categories of people. For this particular client, how is that going to be reenacting or repetitive, or how could that be reparative and new? But a second thought there is, I am reserved about self-disclosure, and I don't do a lot of it, and the older I get, the less of it I do. And I think there's often an intention here of sharing, but I think it often has a different effect. I think it often takes the client out of their own experience and into the therapist. And I think it's often almost a roadblock for the client. So I am judicious and minimalist about self-disclosure, if you will. But there's a different word that's close, and I don't think it gets enough attention. And I was trying to role play it with you, and I couldn't quite get there as effectively as I wanted to. So I'm not so big often on self-disclosure. I'm a huge fan of the self-involving statement. Right now, as you're talking to me, Bob, I'm almost feeling that no matter what I do, it's going to be the wrong thing. I'm not telling you about my mother and my parents' divorce when I was 5, but right now, in the here and now, as you do this, I'm talking about I'm sharing the effect you are having on me. What I'm feeling as you tell me about this, Roberta, I feel, I just feel so sad. It's heartbreaking for me to hear this. So I can often use my own experience of what the client is saying or what they are doing with me as a mode of interpersonal feedback or as a mode of empathy. That self-involving comment, we're now in the immediacy intervention category or box. I think this is very powerful. Faith and I have to talk about, you read these counseling theory books and it gets lined up. Here's these directive approaches and here's these non-directive approaches. That's about as useful to me as liberal or conservative or something else. It just don't cut it. So this is a way I can be very active and very engaging with clients. With Faith and I, as you probably both are. But we are not directive. We're not telling somebody where to go. We're not telling somebody how to live their life. We're not telling somebody how to sell the car, buy the house, marry. We're not telling people how to lead their lives. But we are actively engaging in this highly personal way. And that self-involving comment, but not so much that self-disclosing comment, I think is a very powerful and bread and butter, every session kind of intervention.
This next question, we got to a bit in one of the role-playing scenarios, I think, but I think it's a good question to ask nonetheless. How can you effectively maintain the therapeutic relationship and empathic understanding when faced with a situation where you believe it's necessary to challenge a client's belief systems?
I think it's how you approach is really the key. That it's, you know, you have a 16-year-old who's being promiscuous and is in danger of getting themselves infected with, you know, some disease or something like that. I think it has to do with how you speak to that, and the approach is really the key. It's about conveying your caring, your feeling about their safety, and you join them in talking about safety. And you know, their belief might be, I don't care, it doesn't matter, you know, this is what I do, and that might be a belief that, you know, it doesn't matter. So it's how you enter. It may be, so it's how you, to me, it's how you enter and the nature of the relationship you have. So you can talk about someone's belief system in a very respectful way and explore it together. And I think it's about exploration and clarification and sort of saying, does this work for you? And how is it working for you? And how is it not working for you? And when you begin to do that in a way that, you know, you're journeying together in clarifying this belief system and how this belief system is or is not working for them, I think that clients can then make choices that are really better in their lives. So that is sort of, it's not challenging, but it's helping them challenge the belief system.
Yeah, and Faith is saying we do this by not coming with judgments or press for change or to do things we think they should do, but for a genuine concern for their safety and well-being. I think that's the different approach that Faith is saying, this ain't going to work and this is going to work.
And you help them sort of work through that, but you join them in helping them work through that and come to a place where they can sort of see, this is not working or this is not in my best interest.
I'll ask two more, and they're kind of related. Another doctoral student describes empathetic, caring, non-judgmental relationship therapy has been successful. Any tips for transitioning away from therapy without risking feelings of abandonment, especially considering that the client came to therapy with issues of abandonment?
Yeah, and that's a really good question, because really beginning to terminate is really hard for many clients who have had abandonment issues and who have had loss issues. And in many instances, I really recommend that the therapist start early talking about how the client came in, how the client has grown, and how you believe in the client's strengths and growth, and that maybe they begin to see each other every other week, for example, as a transition to exiting. And as they do that, talking about the strengths that are there now, and building into that the fact that the client is now able to think through and work through the problems and has now become, is in essence, their own therapist, and to acknowledge that there may be times that the client may need to come back for a booster shot, you know, and that that's okay and that that's not a failure, but really to transition, and you may need to transition to every other week, every third week, and to do it in a thoughtful way and talk about it as you do that. So I think it's a reasonable way to go, and clients can do that if they know that they're not losing someone right away, immediately, and to talk about where they've come from and how far they've come, and how much they do have, and how much they've internalized the therapist's strengths too.
Using different words for just exactly what Faith is saying: safe haven, secure base. That abandonment, loss individual needs a safe haven, and they need, as Faith is saying, reassurance that I am here right now, and at points in the future I or others could be. Safe haven. But I think we often miss this. But at the same time, even that abandonment challenged client also needs a secure base. It is okay for me, for you to grow up, move on, do well, and not need to need me. I don't need you to be dependent on me. I take pleasure in your success. I like the part of you that's strong and moving out on your own. Mm-hmm. So many of our clients with abandonment issues, you know, what drives people crazy, we get people mixed messages. So I abandon you and leave you and don't respond, but at the same time, I also fail to support, or I actively sabotage and undermine your efforts towards surpassing me as a parent, mm-hmm. getting bigger, stronger, moving up and out. And so that client needs both messages. I can hear your distress and join you in it, but I can also take pleasure in your independent functioning, and that you don't need me anymore. That doesn't hurt me, that doesn't wound me. I'm not going to do separation guilt. Mm-hmm. Safe haven and secure base both play here centrally, and I think therapists often fail to have the secure base side of the coin in mind at that termination phase.
Okay, I think we have time to squeeze in this, what I think is a related question, and it sounds like a really challenging scenario. A student writes that the organization where she works requires her to turn her clients over to a new therapist every 60 days. What advice do you have to help the client maintain trust and maintain motivation to continue to improve their experiences in therapy through the transition?
Oh my gosh.
Who wants to?
Whoa.
I would validate the client's experience. I would do straight talk. I'd say, I don't think you can maintain trust. I think this is an external structure in which there's limited room for help here. And I would not try and befuddle that client and think that they could address and resolve long-standing relational issues when they're constantly confronted with attachment and rupture. And so I would not mystify the client, but help them sort through the realistic constraints of what they got.